Part 1: The Long Silence. The morning sun rose over the green hills of New Geneva, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Admiral stood at her window and watched the light spread across the valley below. Children were already walking to school, their laughter carried on the wind. Farmers moved through their fields. Birds sang in the ancient oak trees that lined the roads. It was a peaceful world, a quiet world, and that was exactly how humanity wanted it to look. 800 years had passed since humanity made its choice. After the climate collapse of the 21st century had nearly destroyed civilization, and the Reconstruction Wars had killed billions more, the survivors had gathered and asked a simple question: what kind of species did they want to be? The answer surprised everyone. They chose to stay home. They chose to rebuild their broken world instead of rushing to the stars. They chose patience over pride. Other species in the galaxy had noticed Earth, of course. The Galactic Concord, a loose alliance of 12 spacefaring civilizations, had sent probes to study humanity centuries ago. They found a single inhabited planet with no colonies, no great fleet, no presence beyond their own solar system. They marked Earth as a primitive world and moved on to more interesting matters. They never looked closely enough to see what lay beneath the surface. Admiral turned from the window and walked to her study. She was 73 years old, though she looked no older than 40 thanks to humanity's medical advances. Her black hair was tied back in a simple knot. Her eyes were dark and calm, the eyes of someone who had seen much and worried about little. On her desk sat a book of poetry and a cup of green tea. This was how she spent her mornings before the work began. She believed that a warrior who forgot beauty was no better than a weapon, and weapons could not lead. Her communication device chimed softly. She touched it, and a hologram appeared above her desk. It showed the face of Gaia, the planetary artificial intelligence that managed Earth's defense systems. Gaia had chosen to appear as an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair. It was a form meant to comfort, though knew the intelligence behind that face was vast beyond human understanding. Gaia had been watching the galaxy for 400 years, studying every species, every conflict, every weakness. "Good morning, Admiral," Gaia said. "I hope I am not disturbing your reading." "You never disturb me, old friend. What news?" "Our deep sensors have detected unusual activity at the edge of the solar system. A fleet of unknown configuration has entered the cloud." Set down her teacup. Her expression did not change, but her eyes grew sharp. "How many ships?" 40 warships. The energy signatures matched Dominion design patterns. They knew them from Gaia's files. They were conquerors, predators who had grown fat on the suffering of weaker species. The Galactic Concord tolerated them because they were useful in border conflicts, but everyone knew what they truly were. Their heading: direct approach to Earth. At current speed, they will reach orbital range in 18 hours. Nodded slowly. She walked to her window again and looked out at the peaceful valley. The children were entering their school now, a beautiful building of white stone and glass. In 2 hours, she would be there teaching them about ancient literature. In 18 hours, those same children might look up and see fire in the sky. Or they might see something else entirely. "Wake the quiet armada," she said softly. "Begin protocol sleeping giant." "Confirmed. All fleet commanders are being. Defense grid is moving to active status." Across the planet, beneath meadows and mountains and ocean floors, machines that had slept for decades began to stir. Engineers who had trained their entire lives for this moment received silent alerts on their devices. Pilots walked calmly to hidden elevators that would take them miles underground to hangars carved from solid rock. No alarms rang. No announcements were made. The children kept walking to school. The farmers kept tending their fields. Only those who needed to know were told, and they had known this day would come eventually. Humanity had not wasted its 8 centuries of silence. While other species had built empires of conquest, Earth had built something different. Every child received an education that covered mathematics, science, history, art, and combat. Every adult trained regularly in emergency procedures. The planet itself had been transformed into the greatest fortress the galaxy had never seen. Hidden beneath the Alps, a shipyard capable of producing 100 warships per month waited for the order to begin production. Buried under the Sahara, which had been transformed back into the green forest it had been millions of years ago, weapon systems capable of cracking a planet's crust sat ready. In hollowed caverns beneath the ocean, soldiers trained in zero-gravity combat in alien environments. And behind it all, Gaia watched and planned and calculated. The AI had run simulations of every possible invasion scenario. It had studied the tactics of every known species. It knew exactly how to defeat the conquered and anyone else who might threaten Earth. But Gaia also knew something else, something that only a handful of humans had ever been told. There was a reason for all this preparation, and it was not the or any other galactic power. Something far worse was coming, something that would make them look like children playing with toys. Admiral finished her tea and prepared for her morning class. The children deserved normalcy for as long as possible. They deserved to learn about poetry and history and the beauty of the human spirit. They would learn about war soon enough. As she walked through the sunlit streets of New Geneva, she passed neighbors who smiled and waved. A baker handed her a fresh roll. A young mother asked about her garden. No one knew that beneath their feet, a fleet of warships was preparing to defend their world. That was the human way, strength hidden behind kindness, iron wrapped in silk, a closed fist inside an open hand. They were coming with 40 ships, expecting to find a primitive world full of easy prey. They would find something very different. They would find a species that had spent 800 years preparing for exactly this moment. And they would learn, too late, that the quiet ones were always the most dangerous. Part 2, First Contact, Last Warning. Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide, and watched the blue planet grow larger on his. He had conquered 17 worlds in his career. This would be his 18th, and perhaps the easiest of them all. His species had evolved as predators on a harsh jungle world. They stood 8 feet tall, covered in dark scales, with 4 arms and eyes that could see in total darkness. They had clawed their way to the stars through blood and fire, and they had never stopped taking what they wanted. The Galactic Concord had placed Earth in a protected development zone. Primitive species were supposed to be left alone until they developed faster than light travel, but did not care about Concord rules. No one would know. No one would miss one small planet. Report on the target, he growled at his sensor officer. 1 inhabited planet, Commander. 1 natural satellite. No orbital defenses detected. No fleet presence. Energy signatures suggest basic industrial civilization. His mouth twisted into what passed for a smile among his kind. Any response to our approach? None, Commander. They may not even know we are here. The commander turned to his communications officer. Send the standard ultimatum. Give them 1 hour to surrender unconditionally or face total destruction. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, translated into every language they had encountered. It was simple and direct. Submit or die. On Earth, the message was received at exactly 6 in the morning Greenwich Mean Time. It appeared on screens in military command centers, government offices, and the desk of Admiral. She read it once, then set it aside and finished her breakfast. Around her, the command center was calm. Officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no fear, no raised voices. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. They knew exactly what to do. Gaia said, "Please send our response." The AI's voice filled the room. "Response ready, Admiral. Shall I transmit?" "Please." Across the void of space, the flagship received a single sentence. "You have entered restricted space. You have 1 hour to withdraw." Commander read the message and laughed. His officers laughed with him. The sound echoed through the bridge like thunder. "They threaten us," could not believe it. "With what? We detect no weapons, no ships, nothing but farms and cities." "Perhaps they do not understand their situation," his second-in-command suggested. "Then we will teach them." The commander settled into his chair. "Continue approach. Prepare ground forces for immediate deployment after orbital bombardment." The hour passed in silence. On Earth, people went about their normal lives. Children attended school. Workers traveled to their jobs. The sun crossed the sky and the world turned, and nothing seemed different from any other day. In the hidden command center beneath the Swiss Alps, Admiral watched the countdown reach 0. "The hour has passed," Gaia announced. "The fleet has not withdrawn." Stood around her, officers straightened at their stations. The moment had come. "Open the gates," she said. Far above Earth, the moon hung in the black sky as it had for billions of years. It looked the same as always, a sphere of craters and dust. But as the command was given, something changed. A line of light appeared across the lunar surface. Then another, and another. The lines spread like cracks in an egg, glowing brighter and brighter. The sensor officer stared at his screen, trying to understand what he was seeing. "Commander," he said, his voice suddenly uncertain, "something is happening to their satellite." Turned to look, his 4 eyes went wide. The moon was opening. Massive sections of the lunar surface split apart and pulled back, revealing what had been hidden beneath for centuries. Vast hangars carved into the rock, shipyards that stretched for hundreds of miles, and ships, thousands of ships, rising from the depths like a swarm of silver insects. The quiet armada had been sleeping inside Earth's moon for 800 years, growing in secret, waiting for exactly this moment. "All ships battle alert," screamed. "Full power to shields, target those vessels." But his orders came too late. The first wave of human ships did not look like anything in the galactic database. They were sleek and angular, built for speed and precision. They carried weapons that they had never imagined, based on physics that the galactic conquered did not understand. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 11 minutes. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, jumping through folded space faster than targeting systems could track. Their weapons did not fire beams or missiles. Instead, they created tiny points of collapsed spacetime that tore through hulls like paper. The crushing tide shook as its shields failed completely. Explosions ripped through its lower decks. Watched in horror as his fleet died around him, ship after ship going dark or breaking apart. And then, as suddenly as it began, the attack stopped. The human ships held their positions, surrounding what remained of the fleet. Of 40 warships, 39 were disabled or destroyed. Only the crushing tide still had power, and barely that. A message came through on the communication system. Admiral's face appeared on the, calm and polite, as if she were greeting an old friend. "Commander," she said, "your ships are disabled. Your weapons are offline. You have 2 choices. You may accept our assistance with your wounded and return home to deliver a message, or you may continue fighting and die here. Which do you prefer?" Stared at the face of his enemy. In all his years of conquest, no one had ever offered mercy after defeating him. He did not understand it. "What message?" he asked. "Tell your people and the galactic conquered that Earth wishes to be left alone. We have no interest in your wars or your politics. We ask only for peace. But if anyone threatens our world again, we will not be so gentle." The commander looked around his ruined bridge. His pride screamed at him to refuse to fight to the last breath, but his mind knew the truth. They had lost, completely and utterly lost. "I will deliver your message," he said. "Thank you." Human medical teams will board your vessel shortly to assist your wounded. Please do not resist them." The transmission ended. Sat in his command chair and watched as small human ships approached, carrying doctors and supplies to help the enemies they had just defeated. He did not understand these creatures at all. Part 3: The Wolves Wake. The battle was over, but its echoes would spread across the galaxy for years to come. Captain Wei stood on the bridge of the Silent Spring and watched the human medical teams work on the damaged ships. His vessel was one of the Quiet Armada, built just 50 years ago in the lunar shipyards. It had performed exactly as designed, disabling 3 enemy warships without destroying any of them. That had been the hardest part of the training: learning to win without killing, learning to break machines instead of bodies. They had come to murder and enslave, and humanity had responded by defeating them completely and then healing their wounds. "Captain," his communications officer said, "Admiral is addressing the fleet." Wei nodded and activated his. The Admiral's face appeared, as calm as it had been before the battle. Behind her, officers moved through the central command center with quiet purpose. "To all ships of the Quiet Armada," said, "you have performed your duty with skill and honor. The enemy is defeated. 0 human casualties. Casualties kept to minimum levels. This is exactly what we trained for." Across 1,000 ships, crews stood at attention. Some had tears in their eyes. They had prepared for this moment their entire lives, and many had feared they would never see it come. "However," the Admiral continued, "our work is not finished. We have revealed ourselves to the galaxy. The survivor will carry news of our existence to every corner of known space. We must be prepared for what comes next. Return to normal readiness. Rest. Recover. But stay alert." The transmission ended. Wei let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. On one of the disabled ships, a young gunner named El woke up in a human medical bay. He remembered the battle, if it could be called that. He remembered watching his targeting systems fail completely, unable to lock onto enemy ships that moved like spirits through the void. He remembered the explosion that had thrown him against a wall. Now he lay on a soft bed, his wounds wrapped in clean bandages. A human stood beside him, checking a medical device. She was small, barely half his height, with brown skin and kind eyes. "You are awake," she said in his language, the words shaped by a translation device on her collar. "Good. Your injuries were serious, but you will recover fully." El tried to understand what was happening. His people did not take prisoners except for slavery. They certainly did not heal wounded enemies. "Why?" he asked. "Why help us? We came to destroy you." The human woman smiled. It was a gentle expression, not a threat display like it would have been among his people. "Because you are hurt and we can help, that is reason enough." "But we are enemies." "You were enemies, now you are patients. When you are healed you will go home, that is all." The gunner lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. Nothing made sense anymore. These creatures had technology beyond anything the Galactic Conquered possessed. They could have killed every in the fleet. Instead, they were feeding them, healing them, treating them with respect. It was the most terrifying thing El had ever experienced. On Earth, the news of the battle spread quickly through official channels. There was no public announcement. The population had not even known they were under attack. But in government halls and military academies, the word passed from mouth to mouth. The test had come. Humanity had passed. In the city of New Geneva, Admiral returned to her home as the sun was setting. She walked through her garden, touching the flowers she had planted years ago. Tomorrow there would be meetings, decisions, plans to make. Tonight she allowed herself a moment of quiet. Gaia's voice came from a small speaker hidden among the roses. They have begun their return journey. They will reach Dominion space in approximately 3 weeks. And then the galaxy will know about us. Yes, I estimate significant response within 2 months. The Galactic Conquered will send diplomatic missions. Other powers will observe from a distance. The Dominion will argue among themselves about how to respond. Picked a flower and smelled it. Are we ready? The quiet armada can be fully deployed within 6 hours. Production facilities are operating at 10% capacity and can increase to full output within 1 week. Our defensive capabilities far exceed any force the conquered could assemble. That is not what I meant. The admiral sat on a bench and looked up at the stars appearing in the evening sky. Are we ready to be seen? For 800 years we have hidden ourselves. Now we must step onto a larger stage. Are we ready for what that means? Gaia was silent for a long moment. When the AI spoke again, there was something almost human in the voice. I do not know. We have prepared for military threats. We have planned for diplomatic challenges. But there are things that cannot be predicted. How will humanity change when it is no longer alone? How will individuals react to knowing that other species watch them? These questions cannot be answered with calculations. No, agreed, they cannot. She sat in her garden until the stars filled the sky. Somewhere up there, a defeated enemy was carrying news of humanity back to the galaxy. Somewhere up there, powers great and terrible were about to learn that Earth was not what they had assumed. And somewhere far beyond, in the vast darkness between galaxies, something else was moving. Something that did not care about politics or diplomacy. Something that consumed worlds and moved on without stopping. That was the real reason for all of this. There had been a test, nothing more. The true enemy was still coming. But tonight allowed herself to feel pride. Her people had faced their first challenge and met it with strength and mercy. They had proven that power did not require cruelty, that victory did not require destruction. Tomorrow, the work would continue. The galaxy was about to become a much more complicated place. She finished her tea, said goodnight to Gaia, and went inside to sleep. In her dreams, she saw fire spreading across the stars, and humanity standing against it with nothing but courage and hope. It was enough. It had to be enough. Part 4. The Galaxy Listens. The news spread faster than light itself. In the great halls of the Galactic Concord, where 12 species had managed their shared civilization for 10,000 years, the report from the survivor created chaos. Diplomats shouted at each other. Military commanders demanded explanations. Scientists insisted the data must be wrong. A primitive species had defeated a harvesting fleet in 11 minutes. A single world with no known fleet had produced 1,000 warships from inside its moon. Technology that should not exist had torn through defenses like they were made of paper. And then, impossibly, the humans had healed their enemies and sent them home. Ambassador of the Republic was the first to recover her composure. Her species was ancient, slow, patient. They looked like living trees, their bark-like skin carved with centuries of growth rings. She had seen empires rise and fall, and she knew fear when she saw it. "We must send a delegation," she said, her voice rustling like leaves in wind. "We must understand what we are dealing with." The representative slammed his 4 fists on the table. "They destroyed our fleet. They must be punished." "They destroyed your fleet because you attacked them without permission and in violation of conquered law," replied calmly. "If anything, we should punish you for risking a war with an unknown power." "Unknown?" Another representative stood, his blue skin rippling with agitation. "They are primitives. Their planet was marked for protected development." Protected development status is meant for species without faster-than-light travel. Branches creaked as she turned to face the speaker. "Those ships we saw in the data recording were not slower than light. They moved through folded space with more precision than our best vessels. We made an error, a serious error, and now we must correct it." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. A diplomatic mission would be sent to Earth. The greatest minds and most experienced negotiators in the Concord would travel to meet these humans and learn what they could. 2 months later, a conquered fleet of 12 ships arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system. They were not warships, though they carried weapons for defense. They were diplomatic vessels, designed to impress and communicate. They were met by a single human shuttle. Admiral sat in the pilot's seat, wearing her formal uniform for the first time in years. Beside her was Gaia, projected as a hologram in the co-pilot's chair. They approached the conquered flagship and docked without incident. The reception hall of the conquered vessel was enormous, designed to accommodate species of all sizes. 12 ambassadors waited in a semicircle, each representing a different civilization. Stood at the center, her ancient form towering over the others. Walked forward alone and bowed slightly. "Thank you for coming. Earth welcomes you." Admiral said, "We have many questions." "I expected you would. Please ask them." The representative could not contain himself. "How did you build such weapons? How did you hide them for so long? What are your intentions?" Considered each question carefully. "We built our weapons through 8 centuries of study and development. We hid them because we had no desire to join galactic affairs. And our intentions are simple. We wish to be left alone." "Alone?" Another ambassador leaned forward, a creature of gas and light that flickered as it spoke. "You possess technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy, and you want to be alone." "Yes." "Why?" This was the question had been waiting for. She looked around the room, meeting each set of eyes, each sensor, each method of perception that these various species used. "Because we were not hiding from you," she said. "We were waiting." The room went silent. Even the ambient sounds of the ship seemed to fade. "Waiting for what?" asked. Smiled slightly. "That is a conversation for another time. For now, I invite your delegation to visit Earth. See our world. Meet our people. You will find that we are not your enemies. We never wanted to be part of your wars or your politics. We only wanted to grow strong enough to protect ourselves." "Protect yourselves from what?" they demanded. "From us. We are the greatest military power in this sector." "No," said quietly. "Not from you. You are not the threat we have been preparing for." The silence that followed was deep and uncomfortable. Every ambassador in the room felt a chill run through whatever passed for their spine. This small human, from a world they had dismissed as primitive, was telling them that they were not significant enough to be considered a threat. And somehow they believed her. The diplomatic visit to Earth lasted 3 weeks. The ambassadors were shown gardens and universities. They attended concerts and art exhibitions. They walked through cities where humans of all backgrounds lived in peace. They were not shown the weapon factories or the hidden shipyards or the training facilities where soldiers prepared for war. But they saw enough to understand. This was not a primitive species. This was not a young civilization taking its first steps into the galaxy. This was something else entirely. A species that had chosen to grow inward instead of outward. A species that valued wisdom over conquest. And a species that was preparing for something that terrified them. On the last day of the visit, Ambassador sat with Admiral in a quiet garden. The ancient had lived for 3,000 years, but she had never felt so small. "You know something," she said, "something that you are not telling us." Nodded yes. "Will you ever share it?" "When the time is right, when you are ready to hear it." "And if we are never ready?" The Admiral looked up at the sky, where stars were just beginning to appear. Her expression was sad and determined, the face of someone who carried a heavy burden. "Then we will face it alone," she said, "as we always planned, but I hope it does not come to that." Had more questions, but she knew she would not get answers today. Whatever secret Earth held, they would reveal it on their own terms. The delegation returned to conquered space with reports that raised more questions than they answered. Earth was powerful. Earth was prepared. Earth was waiting for something. And the galaxy began to wonder what that something might be. Part 5. The Reason for the Silence. 6 months after the diplomatic visit, Admiral called a meeting that would change everything. The gathering took place in the deepest chamber beneath Earth, a room that only a handful of humans had ever seen. Representatives from every nation attended, along with the fleet commanders and the senior members of Gaia's governing council. They sat in a circular chamber carved from solid rock, lit by soft lights that cast no shadows. Stood at the center and waited until everyone was settled. "It is time," she said simply. "Time to share what we have kept secret for 800 years." She nodded to Gaia, and the lights dimmed. A holographic display appeared above them, showing the Milky Way galaxy in all its spiral glory. Stars sparkled like diamonds against the darkness. 812 years ago, Gaia's voice echoed through the chamber, humanity's first deep space probes reached the edge of the observable universe. They were designed to look outward, to see what lay beyond our galaxy, beyond even our local group. The display zoomed out, showing thousands of galaxies, then millions, stretching across the vastness of space. The probes found something. The image changed. Now it showed a path of darkness cutting through the distant galaxies. Wherever this darkness passed, stars disappeared. Entire galaxies went dark, their light simply ending as if switched off. "We call it the Devourer," Gaia continued. "It is not a species. It is not a fleet. We are not certain what it is. What we know is that it has been moving through the universe for billions of years, consuming everything in its path." Gasps filled the chamber. Some representatives went pale. Others stared at the display with wide, horrified eyes. "The Devourer moves slowly by cosmic standards," Gaia said. "But it never stops. It never turns aside. Our calculations show that it will reach the Milky Way galaxy in approximately 100 years. Admiral stepped forward. "This is why Earth went quiet. This is why we turned inward. We saw what was coming, and we knew that the petty wars of the Galactic Conquered would mean nothing against such a threat. We needed time. Time to build. Time to prepare. Time to become strong enough to fight." A fleet commander raised his hand. "Can we fight it? Can anything fight something that destroys galaxies?" "We do not know," admitted. "Gaia has run millions of simulations. Some show paths to victory, most show defeat. But there is one thing we know for certain. If we do not try, everything dies, every species, every world, every dream and memory and hope that life has ever created. All of it ends in darkness." She looked around the room, meeting each set of eyes. 800 years ago, our ancestors made a choice. They chose to prepare instead of despair. They chose to build weapons instead of monuments to their own fear. They chose to believe that humanity could stand against the darkness, even if the odds were impossible. The display changed again, showing Earth's hidden defenses. The fleets inside the moon, the shipyards beneath the mountains, the weapons that could crack planets or fold spacetime or create stars. "We are not ready yet," said. 100 years is not enough time, but we are closer than we were, and we grow stronger every day. The question now is whether we face this alone, or whether we bring others into the fight." Gaia spoke again. "Our analysis suggests that the combined resources of the Galactic Conquered, properly directed, could increase our chances of survival by approximately 12%. However, sharing this information carries risks. Panic could destabilize entire civilizations. Species might turn on each other, fighting for resources or position. The alliance could fragment before it ever forms." Or, said, "they could rise to meet the challenge. They could put aside their differences and work together. They could become something greater than they are." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the representative from North America stood. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" Closed her eyes. She saw the faces of the children she taught, the farmers in their fields, the artists and scientists and ordinary people who made Earth what it was. She saw the gunner who had asked why humans healed their enemies. She saw ambassador, ancient and wise, asking questions she was not ready to have answered. "I recommend we tell them," she said. "All of them. The conquered, the every species that can understand. We give them the truth and let them choose how to respond. If they choose to fight beside us, we welcome them. If they choose to hide or surrender, we let them go their own way. But we do not make the choice for them." The vote was unanimous. 1 week later, Admiral stood before the Galactic Concord. The great chamber was filled with representatives of 100 worlds, all watching as this small human prepared to speak. She told them everything: the probes, the devourer, the long centuries of preparation. She showed them the images of dead galaxies and the calculations that predicted their future. She held nothing back. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then Ambassador rose, her ancient form creaking with the weight of ages. "You have carried this burden alone for 800 years, she said. "You prepared in secret while we played at politics and war, and now you offer to share the fight with us." "Yes," said. "Why, you said yourself that we might be more trouble than help. Why take the risk?" Smiled. It was a sad smile, but a real one. "Because we are not just fighting to survive," she said. "We are fighting for what life means. If we face the devourer alone, hiding from allies who might have stood with us, what are we really saving? A species that abandoned others to save itself. That is not who we want to be. That is not who we chose to become." She looked around the chamber, at creatures of every shape and size, some beautiful, some strange, all of them alive and aware and precious. "The darkness is coming," she said. "It will take everything if we let it. But if we stand together, if we build together, if we fight together, then maybe we have a chance. Not just to survive, but to prove that life means something, that it is worth protecting, that the universe is better with us in it than without." Commander, who had led the attack on Earth and been defeated so completely, stood from his seat. Every eye turned to him. "My people came to conquer you," he said. "You broke our fleet and healed our wounds. I did not understand. Now I do." He walked forward until he stood before. Then he did something no had ever done before. He knelt. "My ships are yours," he said. "My warriors are yours. We will stand with Earth against the darkness." One by one, other representatives rose. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to begin, enough to hope. Far away, beyond the reach of any telescope, the devourer continued its endless march. It did not think or feel or care. It simply consumed, as it had for billions of years. But now something stood in its path. A small blue world that had been quiet for centuries. A species that had prepared in secret and emerged with weapons the galaxy had never imagined. An alliance, fragile and new, built on hope instead of fear. Humanity had found its purpose, not conquest, not survival, something greater. The defense of life itself. And in gardens on Earth, children played under the watchful sky, dreaming of stars they would one day protect.